talk about some of the most pressing financial challenges that are faced by female entrepreneurs.
Thank you very much, first of all, for having me at this wonderful conference. I'm really happy to be here. And good morning, ladies and gentlemen in the room. I think before I answer that question, I'll just set some context to the responses that will then follow. You know, every year, the African Development Bank does a trade gap survey for Africa. And every year, consistently, that trade financing gap has been stagnant at around $90 billion. Now, that trade finance gap is essentially the amount of trade that is available and seeking financing but goes without financing. Now, what is interesting is when you then look into the data, you find that the majority of companies that are within that 90 billion are SMEs. And when you dig further, the majority of SMEs are owned by women. So what that is telling us is us women, entrepreneurs, are being deprived of trade financing, and that survey confirms that fact. Now, what are the reasons why it's difficult for SMEs, and particularly women-owned and women-led SMEs, to raise financing? There are a couple of reasons. One of them is lack of collateral. That is one of the reasons that banks cite most frequently. And unfortunately, we still live in a world where in some societies, women can't even own or inherit property. So if I can't inherit property because my customary law or societal norms dictate that I can't inherit property from my parents, for example, how will I find the property to offer as collateral to a financial institution to get a loan to run my bank or my business? And then secondly, even those SMEs that do qualify for financing, because of the higher perceived risk of SMEs, you find that the interest rates are so high that it becomes an impediment to the economic survival of my business. You're charging, in some markets, in local currencies, you have to pay 30, 35, 50%. What kind of sales margin do I then need to have in order to make my business viable? We also have a challenge when it comes to fulfilling banks' know your customer requirements. Every bank goes through a process of verifying customers, and in some countries, it may not be the case in South Africa, but there are countries on the African continent where you can't even have an address. In order to find somebody, they will tell you, you know, the church is your landmark, turn right, and it's the 10th house on the left is the house you're looking for. So if I can't prove my residence, I won't be able to access financing. So those are just a few of the impediments that women face in accessing financing.
So just spoken about some of the challenges. Thembi, how can banking solutions specifically address some of these obstacles?
Good morning, Carol, and good morning to the esteemed guests, especially the entrepreneurs and some of the dignitaries in the room. It is such an honor to be in the presence of such experts, and I hope that we can add value to the journey that you go. My colleague Gwen actually laid out a beautiful context in terms of some of the challenges that face women entrepreneurs in not just South Africa, but in Africa as a whole. I came across quite a staggering statistics while I was preparing myself for today. And interestingly enough, it said that about 34% of South African businesses use formal banks for funding. Now, in a country where you have financial institutions that are so well established, I think for myself, that was really something that took me aback. As Standard Bank, we pride ourselves in the commitment that we've made to partner with our clients for growth. That means creating solutions that help our clients start, manage, and grow. Now, when you start a business, I likened it really to, you know, when you have a baby and you're starting that relationship with your baby, and it's exactly that, you're establishing a relationship. And I think a lot of women entrepreneurs take for granted the aspect of developing that relationship with your bank, growing to know and understand the solutions that your bank have and you have access to as an entrepreneur. I think one of the things that I touched on managing and having the right solutions, which banks actually do have, to capacitate women and enable them to manage their businesses effectively, ensuring that we are journeying with you in your growth strategies. One of the other areas that I want to highlight is around the growth aspect, which then comes into an area that I look after around access to markets. Gwen touched that not a lot of women actually look at international markets. I think there's more men-led businesses that export or import. And there's various factors. Obviously, a lot of the women-owned businesses will either not have the right resources, the right capacity, or even just the right knowledge to help them internationalize. I think that's an area where a bank like Standard Bank does focus in building those beyond banking solutions that help our clients mitigate those risks when you go into international markets, and also just ensuring that we are journeying along with you and providing you with the right tools to facilitate payments, to facilitate you meeting the right buyers or even suppliers in various international markets.
Can we talk about finance models that benefit women-led businesses in particular?
Yes, absolutely. I think there's been a general recognition that women are different, and we're different in a good way. And some investors, venture capital funds, hedge funds, have started actually building funds that are focused on women entrepreneurs. And there are a huge amount of benefits that derive from these financial inclusion models. One includes making available access to capital for women. Thembi touched on the high rejection rate for SMEs, and especially women-led SMEs. 34%, in some countries it's as high as 50, 60, or 70%. So these finance inclusive models are really helpful because they understand the woman entrepreneur. In some societies, for example, they do what's called village banking, which is a type of banking model, but in the village setting. And what you find is actually the default rates amongst women are very, very low. So with these finance inclusive models, they understand and appreciate that, so they focus. They actually like women entrepreneurs. So access to capital is one. Secondly, is they build financing and funding solutions that are customized and tailored to the needs of women-owned businesses. And also, you will find that in terms of eligibility criteria, they might have a very, very broad base in terms of who can access or what types of business. They won't, if you go to a traditional bank, they might say, oh, well, we like your business, it's doing well, but we don't actually focus on this particular sector. But these finance inclusive models do actually cater to a broad array of solutions. And I think the third point that I would make is the beauty of these finance inclusive models also is they recognize the importance of financial literacy. So they would also offer things like skills development workshops for the women who are accessing funding from these types of programs.
Yeah. Thembi, I want you to expand on that, financial literacy and the important role that it plays in empowering women entrepreneurs.
I think it's very important for women particularly. The World Economic Forum states that Sub-Saharan Africa has one of the highest participants in terms of women entrepreneurs worldwide, which sits at about 26%. Now, when you sit with that type of statistics, we have to empower women to do better, to deliver better. And one of those areas that we have to focus on is leveraging technology, also collaborative networks. Now, I would encourage women, when we say collaborative networks, you really have to understand the ecosystem of your business. What that means is what actually supports you just over and above your expertise in the service or the product that you're providing. And I think where key areas understanding that not only partnering with your financial institution, but also looking at some of the government institutions that actually support you right at your doorstep. We recently came back from the China International Import Expo, where we give our clients the opportunity to showcase their products. One of the ladies that I met was coming from the Western Cape, and they're producing wines. And interestingly enough, we were also sponsoring Pro Wine, which is a wine event in Shanghai in China, giving South African wineries the opportunity to tell the narrative of South African wines. And she didn't know about West Grow, which was one of our partners that we worked with. And I think that is just an example of understanding the ecosystem that is right at your footstep that can also assist you in terms of financial literacy.
I know this is a big one, and I want to hear from both of you. I'll start off with you, Thembi, because everyone here in the room, they always ask these questions, especially to banking institutions. Access to funding. How can that be improved for female entrepreneurs?
I think that is really information-led, and particularly, if you look at women businesses, are you engaging with your bank? I touched on the relationship model. I think it's important in as much as banks, we will say that, the numbers tell the story. However, there is a story behind the numbers, and often, your bank is there to actually understand the story behind the numbers. And that story behind the numbers tells us why it is that you need that funding. If you're looking to expand your business, calling your banker, calling your credit manager, asking them to come and see your facilities and see your business so that they actually understand the numbers behind the story. And I think that also just gives that more compelling argument, particularly when your bank is invested, I'd say emotionally, in what it is that you're doing. Then we're able to easily just walk with you in that path to ensure that you have access to that funding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And one of the questions I often ask myself links to financial literacy, which feeds into the next question, is why on earth are we not taught financial literacy in school? We are allowed to go through this 12, 13-year education period before tertiary education, and we fumble into the world, not really understanding how to budget, manage our businesses, manage costs, the difference between turnover and net profits, et cetera. So, I think I'd just like to make the point that, the Africa Free Continental Trade Area is a huge opportunity for all entrepreneurs in Africa. Play big. You don't need to play small. The market is a 1.3 billion person market across Africa. So the implementation of the AFCFTA actually brings a huge opportunity for us, because sometimes what banks are looking for is scale. They might say your business is too small for our thresholds. We don't do microloans. You need to go down the road to the microfinance institution. But if you're able to demonstrate that you can scale that business by accessing bigger markets, it also makes it easier for banks to support you. But then on the banking side, some of the things that the banks themselves can do is maybe to try and learn from the models that I spoke about earlier with the hedge funds, the NGOs, the woman-focused venture capital funds. They're doing something right. So what can the banks learn from those types of institutions to enable them to also offer those types of solutions? They need to also ensure that they introduce gender-sensitive lending practices, for example. I know a lot of banks, for example, use a point-scoring model when it comes to assessing SMEs. And I gave the example of village banking. We know that the default rate in women-owned businesses is very low. So why not make that tweak in your model? If the woman is if the business is woman-led or woman-owned, you can change the score to enhance it, give the woman extra points so that they are on par with their men. And then lastly, I think we also, as banking institutions, need to eliminate gender biases. Don't judge me as I walk through the door just because I'm a woman. Hear my story, see my facilities, as Thembi alluded to, and understand what I'm actually doing before you make that decision based on an unconscious bias that you hold.
Tell us about some innovative banking products, services that are designed to support women in business.
I think Gwen touched on the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. That is really a big opportunity for businesses to grow. It is our role as banks to also demystify that, we only bank the corporates, especially when they're internationalizing. We actually work with very small businesses. Standard Bank has a presence in about 20 countries. we have established from an information perspective, we have what we call a trade barometer, which really focuses on about 10 markets in South Africa, providing you with all the information around what are those markets, what to expect when you go into those markets, your competitors, and just some of the analysis that would help you really entrench yourself. But I often say, when you travel, look out for the brands that you know. When you get lost in a foreign city, I think the best way is to find a Starbucks. Don't quote me on that, but they will have Wi-Fi. They'll have the necessities for you to actually be able to start and move from point A to B. And I think that's what we also offer by having that presence in those markets, being able to help our clients, be it inter-region or elsewhere in other markets in the world.
Let's wrap up this panel discussion by talking about the future, looking ahead. Can you tell us about some future trends in banking and trade solutions that could further empower female entrepreneurs and really create this wider societal benefit?
Absolutely, and I think I would be amiss if I didn't talk about technology. The world is now driven by technological advances. They're coming in different forms, artificial intelligence, blockchain, etc. But maybe I'll also take the opportunity, because I'm coming from a development finance institution, to talk about some of the specific technological advances which will benefit women as we move forward. One of the challenges that we have in Africa, especially when we talk about cross-border trade, is access to foreign currency. If I'm in Kenya and I want to export goods to Cameroon, my Cameroonian buyer has to first convert their local currency into US dollars. I receive the US dollars in Kenya and I convert them into Kenyan shillings. All that does is, one, it will discourage me because there might not be access to foreign currency on the market. So Afreximbank has developed a pan-African payments and settlement system, which enables African entrepreneurs to trade in their respective local currencies, so eliminating the dollar. So what this will do, it will encourage people to access those foreign markets, because I now don't have that pressure of the dollar exchange rate is going wild, or there just is no dollar availability on the market. The Cameroonian buyer can pay in their local currency, and the Kenyan supplier will receive their Kenyan shillings. At the end of the day, the banks only settle the net differential in US dollars. So that's one big innovation that will really be a big boost for the implementation of the FCFTA. A second example of technological advances that you can all look out for is Afreximbank has also developed what is called the Africa Trade Exchange. This is a digital marketplace, Africa-wide digital marketplace. You can go onto ATEX, it's called ATEX for short, atex.africa. You can list your goods on ATEX so that everybody on the African continent can see what you are selling. And underpinning that, there's a logistics platform, there's the payment system that is being implemented, and there'll also be eventually financiers. Right now, Afreximbank is the only financier. And you don't, by the way, you don't only have to list on the platform if you need financing. Even if you're just doing an open account trade, it's a great way to access other markets. It'll tell you what goods are available in other parts of Africa and where your goods might be in demand as well. And we hope that banks like Standard Bank and other African banks will also join us on this platform to then be able to finance the trades that support.
I think Gwen touched on some of the products that we're very much plugged into. She really mentioned around the ability to trade in currency, particularly in the African market. I think we understand that time is money, and developing tools that really improve the ease of doing business for our clients, and using technology to ensure that we are creating that access for them, and also making sure that they're able to interlink into those markets with the right advice as well as the information that they would require to do that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Gwen. Thank you so much, Thembi. All right, round of applause.